There's something profoundly wrong with how we construct buildings today. In 1872, engineers conducted a survey on Thebergunstave Church in Norway, a traditional wooden structure, during one of the most brutal winters on record. Outside, temperatures had dropped to -31 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow was piled several feet high. The wind was so fierce it could tear apart a modern camping tent. Yet inside this wooden church, constructed in 1180, with no heating system, no insulation, and no double-pane windows, the temperature remained at 46 degrees Fahrenheit. No fire was burning, no energy was being consumed. The building itself, made entirely from solid wood, using techniques we've almost completely abandoned, maintained a stable temperature. Now compare that to a typical modern American home. Turn off the heating when it's 14 degrees outside. Within 6 hours, your indoor temperature crashes below freezing. After 12 hours, your water pipes rupture. After 24 hours, the house becomes completely uninhabitable. What knowledge did builders 800 years ago possess that we've somehow lost? Across the mountainous regions of Scandinavia, hundreds of log structures built between the 13th and 17th centuries are still standing today. These buildings have survived for centuries through winters that would destroy a modern house in weeks. And they accomplish this using 3 fundamental principles that are completely absent from our modern building codes: thermal mass, absolute airtightness, and a heating approach based not on continuous energy consumption, but on strategic heat storage. These 3 elements functioned as an integrated system. No gimmicks, no miracle materials. Just sound physics working with nature instead of fighting against it. Today, we build against the laws of physics. We attempt to combat the cold with raw energy, and we're failing. Before we go further, drop a comment below. Have you experienced a power outage during winter? How long did your house retain heat? An hour? 6 hours? Or were you seeing your breath after just 30 minutes? Let us know, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you view modern construction. The experiment that proved everything. Let's go back to 2010. Researchers at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology conducted a fascinating experiment. They created 2 identical structures, both approximately 430 square feet. The first was a reconstructed medieval log cabin, built according to 14th century specifications, solid logs 12 inches in diameter, hand-hewn and joined with tongue and groove. No modern insulation, no vapor barriers, no fiberglass. The second was a modern prefabricated house, built to meet current strict energy standards, double insulation, with an R value of 25, vapor barriers, and triple glazed windows. On paper, the modern house was far superior. Both structures were placed in the same valley. The outside temperature was -8 degrees Fahrenheit. Both were heated to a comfortable 68 degrees. Then they shut off the power. The modern house plummeted to 36 degrees within 9 hours. The log cabin, after 48 hours, the interior temperature was still 54 degrees. After 72 hours, 3 complete days without any heat, source, it was still at 43 degrees, well above freezing. The modern house had transformed into a dangerous icebox, while the medieval cabin remained survivable. Why? A modern engineer might claim this is impossible. The R value of the log cabin is only around 10%, while the modern house boasts are 25. Higher R value means better insulation, so logically the modern house should win. But R value only measures heat transfer under steady-state conditions. It completely ignores thermal mass, and thermal mass changes everything. The power of thermal mass: a 12-inch thick log wall, made from old-growth pine, weighs approximately 80 pounds per linear foot. Wood has exceptional heat capacity, meaning it can store enormous amounts of thermal energy. When the cabin is heated, the wood absorbs that heat deep into its structure. When the heat source stops, the wood slowly releases it back over hours and even days. In the modern house, the walls are basically a sandwich half-inch drywall, a plastic vapor barrier, fiberglass insulation, and thin exterior siding. The entire assembly weighs maybe 10 pounds per linear foot. There's virtually no mass to store heat. The insulation slows heat loss, but it stores nothing. As soon as the furnace stops, the warmth in the air escapes through microscopic leaks and thermal bridges. And because modern construction has no thermal mass, there's no reservoir to maintain the temperature. Medieval builders understood this intuitively. They harvested trees that were at least 80 to 100 years old. In the frozen north, trees grow extremely slowly, creating incredibly tight growth, rings often over 100 rings per inch. This produces exceptionally dense, heavy wood. 1 cubic foot of old-growth pine weighs over 37 pounds, compared to modern plantation pine at just 28 pounds. That density is critical. More mass equals more storage capacity. More storage means a longer thermal lag. It takes 12 to 18 hours for exterior cold to penetrate a 12-inch dense log wall. By then, you've typically rebuilt your fire. The cabin functions like a thermal battery, smoothing out temperature fluctuations. Airtightness. The hidden problem: but mass alone isn't sufficient. You need absolute airtightness. And here lies the second revelation. Despite all our modern building wraps and ceiling tapes, contemporary homes leak air like sieves. Blower door tests reveal that the average modern home has cumulative leaks equivalent to leaving a 20 by 20 inch window wide open year. That's not an exaggeration. Add up every gap around your electrical outlets, baseboards, and windows. That's the opening you're constantly heating. When it's 5 below zero, frigid air is pouring through that gap continuously. Your furnace isn't fighting the walls. It's fighting an invisible open window. The log cabins didn't have this problem. The logs were joined using a scribe-fit technique where each log was custom cut to mirror the shape of the one below it. This took weeks. A single room could require months to frame. But the result was a wall with virtually zero airflow. Then came the chinking. The gaps were packed with sphagnum moss from bogs, which can absorb 20 times its weight in water. When dried and compressed, it expands into every microscopic gap. Over that, they applied a mixture of clay and animal hair, usually sheep or goat. The clay hardens to create an airtight seal, while the hair acts like reinforcement to prevent cracking. It's a breathable system. Vapor can escape, but drafts cannot enter. When researchers test these 600-year-old cabins today, many meet or exceed modern passive house airtightness standards. A structure built with an axe and moss is tighter than a suburban home built with advanced composites. The revolutionary heating strategy. The third element is the heating strategy. And this is where it becomes truly fascinating. We typically imagine old cabins with open fireplaces, but open fireplaces are thermal disasters. They pull massive amounts of warm indoor air and blast it up the chimney. A roaring open fire can actually make a house colder by creating negative pressure. Instead, Scandinavians used masonry heaters, massive units built from stone or brick, weighing several tons. You burn a hot, fast fire once or twice daily. The combustion is complete and clean, but instead of the exhaust shooting straight out, it winds through a labyrinth of channels inside the stone mass. The gas transfers its heat to the stone before reaching the chimney. By the time smoke exits, it's barely warm. All that energy is captured in the stone. This stone mass then radiates heat gently for 12 to 18 hours. The surface stays around 140 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to feel comfortable, but safe to touch. You can lean against it or sleep beside it. The heat is radiant, meaning it warms objects and people, not just air. Radiant heat creates comfort at lower air temperatures. You can feel cozy in 60-degree air if you're near a 160-degree stone wall. A modern forced air system has to heat the air to 72 degrees to provide the same comfort level. That's an enormous waste of energy. Why we abandoned this wisdom so? Why did we stop building this way? 3 reasons: speed, cost, and cheap oil. After World War II, we needed millions of houses quickly. Scribing logs and hand-cutting joints took too long. Stick framing with 2x4s and plywood could be completed in weeks instead of months. Labor was expensive, so materials needed to be cheap. Thin walls with batting were more affordable than solid timber. And then came the energy boom. In the 1950s and 60s, oil and gas were dirt cheap. Who cared if a house was inefficient? You just turned up the thermostat. We stopped building for resilience and started building for low upfront cost. We constructed houses that are on life support, dependent on a constant supply of electricity and gas. Cut that supply and they fail. But energy isn't cheap anymore. The grid is becoming increasingly unstable, and people are realizing their expensive homes are actually fragile. In Europe, specifically Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, there's a massive movement back to solid wood construction. It's not nostalgia, it's physics. Architects are combining traditional log principles with modern technology, seeing massive reductions in energy consumption. A well-built solid wood home can operate on a third of the energy of a conventional build, and if the power goes out, it stays livable for days. What this means for you today: if you're planning to build or renovate a home today and want it to be resilient, efficient, and built to last, adopt these principles. You don't have to live in a medieval structure, but you can incorporate thermal mass. Consider mass timber or solid log construction. If solid wood walls aren't feasible, integrate stone mass inside a masonry heater or heavy stone fireplace surround can serve as your thermal battery. Focus on airtightness. Invest in a professional blower door test and seal every leak. That's more valuable than adding another layer of insulation. Designed for compactness, skip the cathedral ceilings. If efficiency matters to you, lower ceilings and closable rooms keep heat where you need it. Use thermal zoning, heat the living spaces and let bedrooms stay cooler. Modern building codes obsess over our values and upfront costs. They completely ignore resilience and life cycle value. The Scandinavian farmer in his 14th century cabin wasn't primitive. He was a master of applied physics. He understood that heat requires mass, that air leakage is the real enemy, that radiant heat surpasses forced air, and that working with nature beats fighting it with a furnace. We traded that wisdom for speed and cheap fossil fuels. Now that energy is expensive and weather patterns are becoming more extreme, we're paying the price. If you found this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe. We're uncovering the buried knowledge that the modern construction industry would prefer you forget. The medieval log cabin wasn't an accident, it was the result of centuries of experimentation. The structures that failed were abandoned. The ones that worked were replicated. What survived was a system so robust it carried families through minus 30-degree winters with zero electricity and zero gas. The secret wasn't lost. It was just buried under marketing and short-term thinking. Every time you build with thermal mass, seal air leaks, and use radiant heat, you're bringing that wisdom back.